Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm Jeanna.
And I'm Ivo.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday.
We have had some really great weather this past couple of days. It's got me pretty happy. I dragged Ivo outside yesterday. Not because Ivo doesn't like to go outside, because Ivo is a pretty busy guy, so I have to find ways to drag him with me on my little excursions.
Definitely got me co-signing a lot of your bullshit. But, willingly. I do it because I want to. It's just not the priorities that I have set, but then, once you present them, I realize how much they are a priority, and then I end up making time for them. But it's usually the result of me like being neglectful of something that I should be doing. That's
sorry.
No, it's not really. It's fucking. I got way too much shit going on.
You do,
and I shouldn't. But I'm like trying to be a jack of all trades, as I'm sure a lot of people are these days, where they feel like they have to have multiple. Well, my thing is multiple streams of revenue coming in. I don't want to just have all my eggs in one basket, so I'm constantly developing and working on these things to achieve those goals. And it's very easy to forget about the simple things in life, which like taking a walk or going on a hike, with the person that you love.
That's what I'm here for.
It's taking a moment to stop and smell the roses while you still can, and you're definitely great for that. And that's the balance that I need in my life.
So let's cheers to that.
Yeah,
and today we are drinking, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah,
we went to Trader Joe's and we got my favorite, their jalapeno lemonade mix, which is perfect for an easy spicy margarita. And that tastes just as good as I remember. Yay.
Definitely a great summertime drink for sure.
Yeah, highly recommend it. It's their spicy, is it lemonade or limeade?
No, it's a spicy margarita mix.
It's not.
It's not?
No.
Are you sure? I was almost at one point they had one, didn't they? Please don't tell me that we've been getting this whole time.
It's a spicy limeade.
And I've been under the impression that it was a spicy margarita mix.
No, it's a spicy limeade.
Spicy limeade.
Yeah. Shout out to Pinterest for me finding that, because I'll be looking for summertime drinks. So today we're going to be talking about being a father.
Being a father and Father's Day.
Yeah, because that's actually the following week coming up. And this conversation was spawned off of our last conversation, which was about being a step parent. And we put out some numbers out there that a lot of people found very confusing. A lot of the comments that we got were that my math wasn't mathing. And what a lot of our maybe listeners and watchers didn't know is that there was a part of it that I left out in the clip that I put out there that is, I basically did some numbers and I said something to the effect of that in all there are more stepfathers in the world, or excuse me, in the United States than there are stepmothers. And the percentage that I gave, when it added up with the mothers, it didn't make sense to people. And what I left out is that there are still non-cohabitating step parents that weren't part of the equation that I gave when it came to step parents overall. And I know some people might think non-cohabitating step parents, like, why is that even a thing? But it does exist. We actually know one. We know of a step parent that is taking care of their stepchild, but they are no longer cohabitating with the biological mother.
Right.
Which made me think of all of the phenomenal fathers that are out there that are doing things very differently than fathers many times ago.
And not only is he raising the stepchild, but he also had a child with the biological mother of the stepchild. So he's now raising their biological child.
Yes, he is the custodial parent.
He is the custodial parent of the biological child and
raising the stepchild.
The stepchild, yeah.
So it immediately sparked this thing in my brain, because there were a lot of men in the comments saying things like, never me, I would never be a stepfather. And listen, kudos to you. If that's not something you want to do, then that's not something you want to do. Yeah. I just don't appreciate the talking down on people who choose to take on that role. So I really wanted to highlight some of the phenomenal fathers that are out there, because I want to say that you and I know many great fathers that are biological fathers, stepfathers, adoptive fathers, gay fathers. Like, I've seen it all, and some of these men are really fantastic. And I thought it'd be nice to, kind of talk about how things have changed from like our fathers to the parents and fathers that we see now,
Right.
because there is some significant change in the world that we see and how fathers are playing a role in their children's lives.
Yeah, for sure there has been. You know, as we were coming up on Father's Day, I started to like think about this person that I saw on social media say one day. They brought up an interesting point that at that time I didn't really know if it had any merit or if there was any facts behind it. But they were commenting and saying how fathers ain't shit, you know, in comparison to Mother's Day, you know, and how Mother's Day is so, you know, widely celebrated and how big of a thing it is and how much like mothers are praised, and when it comes to Father's Day it's like meh, you know. And, you know, and that was just his description of the of those 2 days in comparison. But it led me to think, like, you know, is it true? And if so, why? Why is it true? And so I did a bit of a deep dive into it.
Okay.
And so I decided to just like really find out when did Mother's Day and Father's Day come about. Yeah. So it turns out that Mother's Day was created on May 12th, 1907. And then 3 years later, on June 19th, 1910, Father's Day was created. But it really wasn't made like an official holiday until 50 years later.
Oh, wow. So like not into the 60s.
Yeah. And so
that was the you know, peace love time. So maybe they were like, yo man, we need to make this official.
Well, I think that so what I found out was that primarily the reason why Mother's Day is celebrated the way that it is and Father's Day is celebrated the way that it is, and some people may feel that one is celebrated more than the other, is that for a very long time fathers were not active roles in the children's lives. And that's primarily due to the way that society was built, you know, through the Industrial Revolution and, you know, like just urbanization and, you know, men being the primary, you know, care providers for the families and always having to be out, you know, and even back, you know, from hunter-gatherer days, you know, it's men were always out, the women were always stayed back with the children and raising the children. So at some point someone thought, you know, forgive me for not remembering her name, I didn't write it down, but it was a woman. She one day thought it would be nice for one day to just celebrate mothers, and it became like something that was just very, you know, meaningless, but thought it was important, and it just really grew into something that what is now Mother's Day. As do many traditions. As do many traditions. So that was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense, you know, and it was just based on the way that society was, that mothers was really an important thing to celebrate. But, you know, that being said, I found it to be kind of sad, you know, that it ended up like that the fathers ended up having to, because of the way society was, and, you know, two parents had to take, you know, roles in the life of the family, where one had to stay home and care for the children, and one had to go out and provide. And so the downside of being a provider was that you weren't really there for the children.
You were out of the house a lot.
Right.
Like, and I think you and I can easily attest to this. Our fathers were 100% like that. They were the providers. They were the men and the fathers that they took care of us by giving money and putting frozen dinners in the refrigerator. That's
primarily how I grew up.
You
know, I grew up.
Same.
I grew up in a single parent household where I grew up with my father, and he worked a lot. You know, sometimes more than, you know, easily 12 plus hours a day, and was the provider.
You know, when you say that, I'm over here smiling because there was a joke in my house. We used to make a song, and it was called, my name is, I'm going to blank my father's name, but my name is such and such, and I work 6 days a week. Because that was like my father's thing. My dad worked 6 days a week. He worked Monday through Saturday. And he was out of the house, and he owned his own business just like your father did. And he was out of the house. And I think you and I both can say this, when you are an entrepreneur, you're sometimes out of the house even more than when you are working a 9 to 5, because you are you are the end all be all. You know, you got to open the business, you got to close the business, you got to take care of your employees.
The
so
first one to leave and first one to open and last one to leave.
Yeah, so I'm smiling because I know that you and I had very similar upbringings when it came to how our fathers were being part of our lives.
Yeah, and then you had the mothers at home being the TLCs, the tender loving caregivers, and men were really just left up to be the providers and the disciplinarians, and
I'm gonna tell your father.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell your father, and it was like, when your father came home, that was that's when the police arrived. So
it's funny that you say that, in addition to you saying our mothers being our TLCs, because, and if anybody doesn't know that, both of our mothers did not play that role in our lives either. Me and Ivo have an interesting past that we did not know each other, but somehow it is like almost identical.
Yeah. So we have an interesting place and time in history right now where I feel like culturally the dynamic is shifting over, where fathers are now realizing how important it is to be a crucial role in the development of a child.
Mm-hmm.
How important it is to be part of your child while they're growing up. Because thinking back at the way my father raised me, I can only imagine, because I honestly, we've never even had a relationship where we sat there and we talked in depth about his childhood and how he grew up. I know bits and pieces of it.
Yeah, you probably know little stories.
Yeah, little tiny stories. I mean, being my father, we weren't one to sit there, especially when I was younger, to have long conversations about our family history and relatives and things that he, I didn't get a lot of stories passed on as to from his childhood, and there weren't a lot of things that he learned growing up that he passed on to me as a child that he wanted to teach me, and so on and so forth. And that only leads me to imagine how rough of a childhood he had, to where
for sure
he didn't easily open up when it came to that.
I'm sometimes when we talk about our dads, it's the similarities are shocking to me, because it was the same thing with my father. I maybe heard a couple of stories. His upbringing was, like you say, very, very rough, especially emotionally wise.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that as rough as his childhood was, it led to him growing up to being a tough person.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a saying that hard times make strong people.
Mm-hmm.
And then strong people make good times.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like my father provided a really, even though he was a tough person, he created a good life for me. I would definitely like to say that, and my mother too, but because I was primarily with my father, he did everything that he could to create a good life. And then good times create weak people. And then weak people create bad times. And then the cycle begins again, where bad times create strong people.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So as interestingly as it is, where right now we're in a part of our history where fathers are finding out realizing how fathers are finding out how important it is to be a part of their children's life. It shows that,
and separate from being a provider,
how important it is to be there, in raising them, and being there for them emotionally, and participating in their lives, and all these things. These take a part of a person to be sensitive and be emotional, to be softer, and it's a direct result of what I see as weaker times coming. Good times creating weak people.
But I don't want to take those two, the weak and softer, and make them connected to each other. I think you actually maybe that's the terminology that's used, but
this is my own personal opinion on
would you
two things that are going on that I see that are they have something to do with each other.
But would you say weaker in a bad sense? I look at it as a good thing.
Yeah, it's not in a bad sense. It's just a result of people growing up in not hard times, or at least not as hard as times as the generation prior to them grew up in. You know, where they're not so focused on surviving and being tough and things like that, you know. And not to say that there aren't a lot of people now in this generation that are dealing with that are dealing with hard times and rough times and growing up and having to be tough and survive, but it's less than
it was prior. Yeah.
And so, you know, the parents of those children, which are, you know, fathers now that are realizing how important it is to be in their children's lives, are being less tough on their children, you know, learning to be more empathetic, learning to be more emotional, learning to be more for them personally, be more present in their lives instead of being such just providers and, you know, and disciplinarians. And so it's great because now we have an opportunity to shift this statistic that Father's Day isn't celebrated as much as Mother's Day because fathers are just not really present in their children's lives.
Yeah, and that going back to what you said earlier, that the mothers were more celebrated because of the TLC, and maybe that shift is happening now where fathers are giving more of that tender, loving care.
Yeah.
And I think that firsthand, you and I have seen it. We have seen many fathers be more present in those ways, in those more loving and caring ways. I can say that I saw it firsthand with you. You know, it was a big factor in our dynamic as mother and father to be very caring on both ends and it not just primarily come from me. And it wasn't like, I'll be honest, it wasn't like something where we just sat down and I was like, so Ivo, I need you to be softer. You know, that definitely wasn't the case. I think it's just directly tied to what you said, is that you and I came from upbringings where our fathers were not like that.
Right.
So because there was a lack of that tender, loving care in our childhood, we immediately want to put that onto our children.
Yeah.
And you said it in the last episode that hindsight is 20/20. So when you look back and you're like, man, I could have definitely used a hug every now and then.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes, I could have. But we have an interesting opportunity right now. Because, as I stated, in my opinion, we're in this space right now where hard times have created a type of person that grew up in the good times. That doesn't mean that, you know, we have to let go of the toughness. That doesn't mean that we cannot be, you know, we can't be every single one of those things all combined. It doesn't mean we can't be a provider, a disciplinarian, and a tender caregiver. And I think that now is the time to capitalize on that. You know, now is the time to try to create a new branch of people that are growing up, raising their children with all of those things together.
Yeah. And I will say that it's not an easy feat.
No, hell no.
And the reason why I say that it's not an easy feat, because once upon a time I was a single mother, so I was doing all of those things by myself.
Yeah.
So I know that it's not easy to be like, hey, I want to love you, I want to discipline you, and at the same time, you know, I have to make sure you're on the right trajectory. It can be
tough.
It can be definitely tough. But when there are two people together saying, we're going to make this commitment to do this together, because let's be real, households nowadays are not like they were, 50 years ago. In the 60s, when, there was a mom that stood at home and a dad that went to work, the majority of households now in the United States are functioning by two working parents. So the dynamic is very different, in the sense of men just don't have to go out and be the provider. So men do have this opportunity. And I think coupled together, if parents say, all right, we don't want to lose this toughness that you're talking about, because I'm big on that. And you know that we were actually just talking about how I want to make sure that our daughter can go out into the world and have this self-advocacy where she can know when it's the right time to stand up for herself. And that comes with sometimes me have to instill things in her that may seem a little tough. I don't always want to just, be like, oh, poor baby, where our parents didn't even necessarily have that conversation with us. It was just like, get up, wipe the tears out of your eyes and keep going. There wasn't that conversation of, I acknowledge your feelings.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a little difficult to grow up from the previous generation and not want to leave all of the traumatic things behind.
Oh yeah, my God, for sure.
I for one know quite a few people that grew up in physically abusive households, and now that their parents, vowed never to lay a finger on their kids, which is by all means like to respect to each parent. No, I'm not here to tell anyone how to raise their kid, but I think it's important to not look at those times of growing up as completely traumatic. I mean, I think perspective is such a powerful thing, and if one could position themselves, and again, I'm not saying that this is easy, but if you could just follow me for a moment here and just imagine being able to do this, if one can position themselves to look back at those memories and find some type of lesson, some type of something that they can label as good, as made them better in some way whatsoever, then take that and bring that forward into their parenting, rather than just leaving all of that disciplinarian behind. Because it is my opinion that children do need discipline.
Oh,
right,
for sure.
Not everybody will agree with me. There's people that probably don't discipline their kids at all, and that's because of, for whatever reason they decide not to. They just don't discipline their kids. They discipline them in a way where it's very much so.
And I just want to be clear that we're not talking about physical discipline. We're just talking about
we're just talking about discipline. Period. They correct them.
Yeah.
Correct their actions, and what they're doing is wrong.
But there should be consequences.
There's no consequences behind their actions. There's no discipline following, saying, "Hey, because you did this, now this is the result of what your actions are."
Yeah.
And having them experience, what happens when they do things that are wrong.
Yeah.
And so, I think that that's very important. And nowadays, for the parents that are deciding to be more of an active role in their children's lives, especially the fathers, not to leave the discipline behind, as a bad thing. Turn it into something positive that you can utilize along with everything else to be a well-rounded parent.
Yeah,
to your child.
I will say this: it is not. I said this before, it is not easy. However, there are so many tools out there that can aid in this transition from being, so hard to try to, soften up your approach when it comes to disciplining your child. I myself have read, I want to say, a good handful of books to try to understand how to better approach children as a whole, and in addition, obviously, our children. I was quite young when I had my boys, but I definitely took some time to try to find ways that I could discipline my boys, because there was a moment in time where they were really acting out, and I needed to find ways to say for them to understand that their actions had consequences, but it wasn't the type of consequences that I would have one time would have met. So it's going to take a little bit of effort for parents, especially fathers, that now I think the transition is happening now. And I want to say our generation and the current generation, I think the next generation, which will be Gen Z, it may be even different, even though I hear a lot of those kids from that generation don't even want children, but that's a whole nother conversation. And that has a lot to do with things that have happened from our generations. But you definitely need to find ways to equip yourself with the tools in order to make this change. And I think that that's so important. I have a hard time wrapping my head around people that just say it's hard and not look into finding ways to make it simpler, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's great that nowadays men are deciding to be more a part of their child's life, and be so much more than just being a disciplinarian and a provider. And the reason I say why this is important, I think it's great, is because I did a little bit of research, and it was on Science Daily. The website of Science Daily had a study from Brigham Young University. And the study basically said that, fathers who are actively taking roles in their children's life, by attending events, talking more, spending more time together, interacting with their children, showing personal interest in their lives, playing video games with them, playing dress up, for the girls, but this is primarily for the boys, really built their masculinity in ways that were positive. So, and fathers who didn't apply these things to their children's lives ended up having children that developed more aggression. They were less emotional. They did not speak out and ask for help, and developed a toxic side of masculinity that we all know. And
yeah, right? and I'm thinking it's because they had this idea of what it was to be masculine.
Right.
So they were trying to achieve that, even though that's not in actuality what true, I guess you could say, masculinity is.
Right. Well,
because it was toxic.
It was it's toxic because the way a male body develops with testosterone, it's very competitive and aggression fueled. Testosterone is kind of like an aggression hormone. It's aggressive in its entirety, if you want to describe it. So when something like that matures and is not taught to speak properly, and is not, it's not given tender loving care throughout that process,
from the male
counterpart of that dynamic, then what you have is a person that has grown up with a bit of toxicity in them, because they just have not learned to develop certain areas of their masculinity in a positive way. So when you have fathers who are doing these things, as far as playing games, attending events, talking more to their boys, spending time and interacting with their children, the result was children who became more emotionally in tune with how they felt, more willing to speak about their feelings in a masculine way, less aggressive, more willing to ask for help. That whole don't cry, don't you act soft, really creates a personality of someone that when something is wrong inside, they don't ask for help. And especially men, because we deal with such aggression and we're so competitive in ways, when we are emotionally troubled, we need help.
I can actually speak to that firsthand. I was raised very, very much like that by my father, to not cry, to not be soft about things.
Yeah.
And me, I'm for a very long time, I'm very different than I was some time ago. But for a long time in my life, I did not let people ever see me exhibit what is considered like weak emotions. Like, right. I didn't cry in front of people. I wasn't easily willing to embrace people. I didn't like hugging. My exterior was very rough because I was raised to be like that, because my dad was like what you would consider a man's man.
Right.
And then I also lacked the presence of my mother, where maybe I would have gotten some of that softness from. So I was really rigid in that sense, coupled with some trauma. But I could see how that could really affect a young man, because not only are they probably lacking that from their home, but society is also telling them that they can't be like that, because it's kind of happening everywhere for the most part, right?
Yeah, definitely. It definitely is. And one other thing that happens as a byproduct of that is there's something is created within that male, which we call a nonverbal issue.
Mm-hmm.
A nonverbal issue is something emotionally that it negatively builds inside of you. You have a negative experience with your life and you don't speak about it. You just internalize it.
But it comes out in all other ways.
And it turns in, so it becomes nonverbal. Mm-hmm. It's an issue that you have within yourself that you have not verbalized yet. That issue contains a type of energy. You know, it's let's call it anger, right? When people have issues, it's discomfort. It's something that doesn't make you feel right. It doesn't sit right with you, right?
Yeah.
So imagine growing up with something inside of you that really is not sitting right with you. How do you think that in time that woven into who you are as a person develops in the later years? It completely changes who you are as a person. It grows with you, it festers, and it never goes away. You know, people like to think that, if I don't talk about something, then, it'll eventually go away. But it never does. It goes away to the rest of the world, but you're carrying it all your life.
Oh, you for sure carrying it. And it is brewing inside of you like a poison.
Yeah. And eventually it comes out.
Yeah.
And so this thing that we're seeing now, where you have this shift in the way that fathers are participating in your children's lives, is, to me, a beautiful thing. It's an opportunity to create a new generation of children, and in this particular case, boys that are less likely to grow up having nonverbal issues, and therefore in their later years becoming people that are end up exploding at some point in their life because of this issue that they had inside that they never ever spoke about. You combine that with the aggression that a male grows up with, and at some point the two are like ticking time bombs. Like, one is the gunpowder and one is the fuse, and eventually they meet, and then and then there's just this explosion.
Yeah.
So it's better to at least unpack one of those at some point in the child's life, so that the other one doesn't ignite when it has nothing to meet with to ignite.
Yeah. I will say though, I know that you've spoken a little bit on like the significant role that fathers will play in a young man's life, and how that in turn can affect a young man, then thus potentially developing this toxic masculinity. As a young woman, my father was a huge part of my life, and I don't mean in the sense of that he played a avid role. What I mean is that I somewhat idolized my father, and I wasn't receiving this. I wasn't receiving the love and affection and emotional, support that I needed as a young girl. And that definitely affected me as a young woman, because it kind of can skew the way you look at men. And when you don't receive positive reinforcement from the male in your family, whether it be your father, let's say your father's not present, let's say you're not receiving that from uncles, grandfathers. I would like to say though that I did have some positive male role models in my life. My uncle, who has since passed away, I talk about him a lot, about some of the great experiences I had with him. We actually did something not too long ago that you did with him that I found was a great experience, and now it's part of our lives, and we will be continuing that experience. What are you talking about?
Going camping.
Oh yeah, that was
something that you used to do with your uncle.
Yeah, and every time we do it, I think one of the best memories is that when we would get to the campsite, the smell that I used to smell, and that sometimes I smell it now and it immediately reminds me of him. But not to dismiss, I had some great memories with my father too, but there was, because he was my father, because he should have been my primary caretaker, and there was a lack of that support. And I'm sorry, before it took me a little bit to get the words, because I don't know if you could tell, like, it's, I can see, yeah, you could see it in my eyes. I get like a
little emotional.
Yeah, I get like a little emotional about it.
It's okay. I mean, this is a sensitive subject, and we all have our moments where, things might not have been in the most positive light.
So, I didn't expect this to happen. I'm sorry, but but what I was saying is that fathers play such a large role in their daughters' lives. Maybe in a way that they don't expect. And it can really affect how a young woman goes out and perceives men in her lives going forward. Yeah. So the one thing I will tell you is that because of the experience that I had with my father, when it came time for me to say, this is the man I'm going to marry, and this is the man that is going to help me raise my 2 previous children, and then one day raise a child together, man, you had to hit so many you had to hit so many points because of what I had lacked growing up. But then I think the joke is on me, because you hold so many similar traits that my father has,
I do,
which are the good ones. So I think it's so important for fathers to understand the important role that they play in their children's lives, and how, when they grow up, when they go out into the world, how that affects their view of potentially the opposite sex. I didn't know if you had any more for us, because I really wanted to go into some of the wonderful things that fathers in today's, millennia are doing, that our fathers wouldn't even fathom doing once upon a time.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so I'm so glad that I had a tissue over here. So first and foremost, one of the things that you touched on, earlier in the conversation, that I have seen more than I've ever seen, is fathers playing dress up with their kids. And yeah, I know that many people can say that they have seen it on social media. Yeah. Fathers playing dress up with their boys. Boys that sometimes want to play dress up in kind of more girl fashion. Fathers playing dress up with their daughters, dressing up as princesses, even going even a little bit further. Something that I see more now than ever, that I fucking adore, because it's my favorite holiday, which is Halloween, is when families dress up as like cohesive characters. So one of the things that like immediately sparked in my brain was I have a friend that one time their daughter wanted to be a character from Star Wars, so the whole family was Star Wars characters. And a lot of men will be like, Halloween, I'm not dressing up, like that's a girl thing. And so many fathers are doing it, and they're all about it. I know you're always willing to dress up.
Yeah, I wasn't.
I just have to make sure that I'm the one.
What's funny is that I myself am part of this changing dynamic in the way fathers are raising their children. So I speak from experience, and in this particular case is one that I have shifted the way that I have decided to be as a parent, because of our relationship. And I'm a work in progress. And that was one of them. I remember for Halloween, I was like never one to really dress up for Halloween,
I don't play that game. Yeah. You dressing up, sir.
And then now I'm all about it, like let's go, let's do it,
But I think you can say this with certainty, but do you not see how it lights up our daughter's eyes?
Oh yeah, of course. I think that's the best part about it, for me at least, it's just watching her excitement and being part of that excitement, and not just being there, but also participating in a way where we're like on the same frequency. I think that's the key difference for me.
Because our thing is like, I know I say Halloween is like, it's my favorite holiday. It's definitely become a favorite in the house where I like to give out candy. So we like to sit on our front porch and we like to give out candy. I love to admire all of the kids' costumes, and our daughter has grown to love that. And now it's like a family thing where we sit on the porch, we play Halloween music. Just the whole fantasy part of it. I think men are taking a more avid role in that and being part of like this more softer side of imagination.
Yes.
Which I think, God, it's so important, because imagination is something that could take a child really far. And I don't think a lot of fathers especially think about that, because, they, again, being the provider, sometimes when you say, Dad, I want to be an artist, or I want to be, those things are very like imaginative, you know?
Yeah, they are.
So it's sometimes hard for men to see the concrete in that, like, how that's going to take a young man or a young woman somewhere. So I think it's great that I love to see that now, especially me being I'm the type of parent, I love creativity. So to have a partner that is willing to like join me in that fun, and our daughter see that it's not just like a woman or a man role, it's just about having a good time. I think that is the key lesson in that. Right?
I agree.
So the next one that I have is housework.
That's a good one.
Men are taking more of an avid role in housework. And I will say this, when I first met Ivo, he was atrocious at it.
Yeah, I used to be pretty funny to watch, just trying to sweep up.
Man, you put some effort into it. But
I particularly remember you laughing at me watching me sweep.
I had no idea what the fuck you were doing.
I was never taught.
And I found that so hysterical, because in my mind, I was like, how is it that you don't have these just like foundational tools of being able to like take care of your space?
Didn't have chores. And again, my father being, out of the house 12 to 14 hours a day, he was never really home to, teach me how to care for myself.
Yeah. You learned a lot from me.
I learned a lot from you, but even before, when I was a child, I learned a lot from my brother, and I learned a lot from, friends and, people around me that I just interacted with, friends, parents, and things of that nature, being over their houses, watching how they did things, and just kind of like learning from other people's families. It's a little weird, but that's just how I grew up.
Yeah. That kind of knocks on my point a little bit from last week, that it takes a village. Sometimes you can learn from other avenues that you don't even expect.
Yeah.
I can tell you firsthand that, yes, you were once upon a time not the greatest at housework. There are times now that you fucking speed past me like Speedy Gonzalez on some of the chores in the house.
I took that shit and ran with it.
Yeah. Ivo sometimes cleans so vigorously that I'm actually tired watching him, because he likes to remove all of the things from it's just too much for me.
When it comes to doing the floors.
Yeah.
I take everything out of the room. Everything off the floors.
And me, I'm just like, no, I'm just going to go around. But on top of that, I would like to say is that we know so many other men that are like you, that them taking the role of doing a good portion of the housework, and not even them looking at it like, oh, I'm doing this and she's doing that. Like, no, this is part of my role of being a man in this household. We know so many men that are just like, yeah, I do that. Or yeah, I clean the dishes. Or yeah, I do this. And there's not like this stigma of, yeah, I'm doing it because she wants me to, or, and I'm so happy to see that shift, because again, if we're living, we're living in the 21st century, right? So if we're living in the 21st century and women are going out to work for a good portion of the time, then shouldn't men be like, that shift should be happening, where it's not even about like gender anymore. It's about like, okay, how are we together?
Yeah, they're finding it equally as important as to take place in the things that happen in the house. As women are finding it equally important to take place, in the things that are going outside of the house. Yeah, and I think that it's a great shift in the dynamic of parenting, and creating more of balanced parents versus one that primarily does one thing and then the other that primarily does another. And that's not to say that we still don't live in a society where these dynamics exist, where they're just heavily shifted, where one parent does one thing and the other parent does another thing. But thankfully, we're evolving. We are changing into something that is creating more of present fathers, which I think it can't be spoken enough how important it is.
You know, as you say that, the other thing that I think about, which is my third thing that I wanted to share, that I see men doing so much more that puts such a smile on my face, is the grooming of their kids. And when I say grooming, I mean doing their hair, getting them dressed. Ivo really took a step in understanding how to do his daughter's hair. But even before that, Ivo, do you remember our middle son, Mateo? He for a long time had, like, you know, somewhat like a little bit lower than his ear hair. And he didn't like the way I did his hair. And it came to a point where he literally would call for you to do his hair because you were softer with it.
I was definitely more gentle with
it.
He
liked your approach, and our daughter's the same thing. Guys and ladies, I'm sorry to say it, but I'm a little rough still. So I do things a little rough. Yeah. And you have taken an avid role in doing our daughter's hair. At night, after she washes her hair, you will braid it. And this is something that I see many fathers doing. It's not just about now taking your son to get a haircut. I see fathers all over social media, you know, taking classes to learn how to braid their daughter's hair, how to style their hair.
I've watched tons of YouTube videos of like, and right now my mission is to learn how to do like intricate braids. Like I want to do like a fish braid. I'm working on the French braid right now. Yeah. You know, like you're not bad. You're not bad at it. I'm not bad with it, but I'm not as good as I would like to be.
Yeah.
I want to be able to do different hairstyles for her. I want to be able to say on a special day when you're not around, to be able to do something special for her hair that she normally doesn't do, that she would be able to have if you were here. I want to be able to provide that for her. So that's something that I'm working on.
I will say though, Ivo has a lot to live up to because doing hair and makeup is my profession. Yeah, so tough, he's never really gonna ever be at my level. Not trying to fill those shoes,
none whatsoever.
I am never going to look down upon what you do because you do it and she enjoys it, which is to me the most important part, right?
Yeah, that's it.
So I see so many men doing this. I remember one time watching a video of this father doing his daughter's hair, and the daughter had hair very similar to mine. It was very tight curl, and he really went in. He's like, he had the sprays, he had the combs, he had everything, and his daughter's face, the way it lit up after her hair was done and the way she looked at herself, again, that is what is the most important part to me, is that role that he took a part in that little girl's life. She's going to grow up and she's going to reflect upon that time that her father spent with her to make her feel special.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for the men that come into her life because she's going to be like, nah, you don't do it like my daddy do it. Right?
Well, that's an important thing, you know, when it comes to fathers and their daughters' lives, is the moments that a father spends with their daughter that make the daughter feel special and happy. These are the things that, when it comes to searching for happiness, a young girl looks for in a partner. You know, that she's reflecting on what she knows as a man making her feel happy, to the moments that she had with her father, and the things that they did that made her feel happy and made her feel warm and safe and comfortable inside.
And then in turn, with the young men that go out and seek and date women, when they have received that love and nurturing from their father, the way that they approach women is very different, especially when they have seen men respect and love other women. The way that they approach women going forward really changes their perception.
Right. Yeah. And also, I mean, I'd like to say that the dynamic that the father, at least the fathers that are still together with the mothers, the dynamic that those two have, the treatment that the father gives to the mother, is also a very important role on how the young boy grows up thinking or feeling like how he should treat women.
Yeah. So I have two other things, and then we're going to wrap it up for this episode. We're actually cutting this one a little short too. Like we said earlier, Evil's a very busy man. He got shit to do. But I still want to make sure we highlight these two things. So the next one is, we are seeing a lot of fathers that are now being stay-at-home dads.
Yes, they are.
And I will say this. I know a couple. You at one time were not completely a stay-at-home father, but I worked more than you.
Yeah.
And
you were head of household at that time.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know what head of household means, that means the primary breadwinner.
Yeah.
That means the person who pays like most of the bills, and while the other one stays home and cares for the home.
Yeah.
That was our dynamic for quite some time. You were out there getting it, and I knew it, and I I supported that at that moment, and I stayed home and I took care of what needed to be taken care of.
And it was fucking amazing, because I never for once ever looked at you then less than as a man, because you were just like, you were supporting our foundation with your pillar at that point, and we needed both pillars, because if we didn't, then our foundation was going to be uneven. Yeah. And I said this in the last episode, you were the support that I was always looking for. So it allowed me to go out there and grind harder for what it was that we needed. And then eventually it like kind of shifted where you start to be out almost just as much as me. But then I had a job where I worked weekends all the time, and you were always home on the weekends. So then you became the primary like activity person. Yeah. You were the father that took the kids places, carnivals, parks. You know, you did these little things with them where I would just come home and you guys would tell me about your day. Or I can't count how many times you went to the beach without me on holiday weekends. Yep. Because I had to work, and people would look at you like, you're here without your wife?
Yeah.
What? Like, I'm sorry, you're here with 3 children? Yeah. And you'd be like, yeah, and why is, like, I'm their father, like, why is that even a thing? And I
was enjoying it. I mean, honestly,
you literally just took the words out of my mouth. I was just about to say, like, you, because that was your thing.
I knew what it was like to bust my ass and work hard, you know. And so here I am in a space where I don't really have to do that. I can just hang with the kids and, like, you know, just feed them and take care of them. And, you know, while my wife, my girlfriend at the time, you know, is out, you know, working and grinding and being the provider for the family. Like, I was doing, you know, not that I was providing for anyone at the time, but I mean, I was just out there doing me, you know, building my life for a very long time. And it was like almost like a breath of fresh air to sit back for a second and just allow someone else to like really take on the bulk of the responsibilities while I lived a different life, you know. And, you know, the interesting thing is that our life didn't really take a shift in the other direction until you decided to switch careers. Yeah. You know? And so you switching careers really, like, you reset your whole career and you entered a whole new industry from the bottom. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, you know, your whole income dynamic changed, and then everything changed. And then so then I had to, like, all right, you know, again, us being supportive. I said, you know what? That's what you want to do. I support you. It's my turn to go out and do what I got to do. And that's what happened. And boom. And that was...
Yeah, and Ivo became the fucking Terminator. This motherfucker was out there jumping through timelines, assassinating people.
Yeah, that was... Oh, God, I can't even...
Yeah, that was a time... You and I reflect so much on our past as far as like how we got to where we are now. Sometimes I'm like, I don't even know how the fuck we did what we did. Because like Eva and I went on a hike the other day, and we were like walking in the woods for like, it was like what, 2.5 hours?
Yeah, about that, yeah.
Or whatever it was. And there's times that like I just stop and I look around and I go, at this point of time, 10 years ago, I would have been at work fucking killing myself. And God, I feel so lucky to be where we are right now, but we had to go through that to get to where we are now.
Absolutely.
So that being said, my last thing, and not that I think that this takes precedence over any of the ones that I have discussed here today, but this was something that was, God, I may get like a little emotional when I say this too, but this one for me was so impactful, and I will always carry this with me. What which was, and I see many fathers do this now, and I'm so happy that this is happening, is that the role that men will take in the prenatal care and the post care when their wives are pregnant and after they have children. You may have missed one or two of my appointments, and it was literally just because I was like, listen, this appointment is almost nothing, sir. You don't need to be here. My OBGYN, I think low key was in love with Ivo. Like, I think if I would have been like, yeah, you guys could go do your thing, she would have.
She was a sweetheart.
Yeah, I loved my OBGYN, and she loved Ivo. But she was just always so fucking shocked by your presence that she paraded you around the office. I remember one time she was like, oh, this is the husband that I was talking about. I think she got locked out of her office one day and you like helped her get in.
I did.
She was parading you around to even the day that I gave birth of our daughter. After she set me up because I had to have a C-section, she walked Ivo into the room holding his hand in the air. This is the father.
Yeah, she was great. But funny thing is that there, she spoke, she was speaking truth, because every time that I went, it was like I barely saw any men around.
Yes. And the postnatal care, you took 2 weeks off of work to stay home with me. And so many men are doing this now. So many men are taking this paternity leave to be at home to support their wives, because there are so many families that have the same dynamic that we do, which is there are only two people. They don't have extended family to help them raise their child. If you didn't stay home with me, I would have had nobody. And I was recovering from my second C-section, and it was a lot harder than my first one. And there were moments where I just looked at you and tears came out of my eyes because the thought of having to do something felt excruciating.
Yeah.
So I want to applaud all of the fathers that are like, putting themselves in that position, because the value that it brings to their wives, the value that it brings to their children. And I could tell you right now, I'm going to, when I get the opportunity, I want to post a picture of Ivo, how he used to swaddle our daughter in like one of those like wrap swaddles so that he could do housework, so that I could rest. He would wrap her because she would immediately like fall asleep, and you would go about doing your business in the house, washing dishes, whatever the hell you had to do. No shame.
I made it a point, and this is how I ended up doing the things that I did. I made it a point to myself to do everything that you did as a mother, as a father to that child. So there was no difference in what we did.
Yeah.
And honestly, if I would have had breast, I would have breastfed that baby too. I'm telling you, I would have. It was the only thing that I couldn't do that you did. Right? Was that? I mean, I did follow your lead a lot because, you were a mother prior.
Yeah.
But once I picked up on those things that I needed to know, I was doing them.
Yeah. 1,000%. I know that there are many men out there doing that currently, and I want to salute you, and I want to wish all of you a happy Father's Day. So at this point, this brings us to the end of our episode. I would just like to say, maybe I haven't said this before, but we have a new episode that launches every Friday. So please like, subscribe, do all that good shit.
Comment and share.
Yeah. And have a happy Father's Day, guys.
Happy Father's Day.
Until we see you next Friday. Peace out.
Peace out.